This is Mr. Ng. You may not recognize him, but you're probably a big fan of his work. In fact, you're probably carrying around some of his art right now. That's because Mr. Ng designed the banknotes that we use every day. According to him, he designed over 700 drafts before the final 7 were approved by a committee. But they're not just pretty to look at. The Singapore dollar is also one of the strongest currencies in the world. Singapore might be a tiny country, but our currency is actually pretty powerful. Over the past 2 decades, the SGD has strengthened steadily against major and regional currencies. For example, it cost about $2.70 to buy one British pound 20 years ago. Today, one British pound is worth about $1.70. So why has the Singapore dollar strengthened over the years? This has a lot to do with what Singapore's central bank, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, does. Since 1981, MAS has used the exchange rate to influence inflation in Singapore.
It's a small open economy which wants to keep the border open for both movement of people as well as money. So that means that they don't really want to practice capital control as much. So that means that Singapore is basically open to the international interest rate more than a domestic interest rate. Rather than pegging it to a particular currency, what they do is to control the exchange rates to reduce the level of inflation that comes externally from imported inflation. It has been fairly successful because from about 1981 to about 2010, the annualized inflation rate has only been about 1.9%. The main policy of Monetary Authority of Singapore is non-inflationary growth.
All over the world, people are feeling the effects of inflation. The Ukraine-Russia war, the global pandemic, and climate change have created a perfect storm that has caused the cost of global goods to increase at a shocking rate. At the same time, the recovery in Singapore's labour market has resulted in higher wages. Businesses are passing on these cost increases to consumers. Just last month, overall inflation hit a 13-year high of 6.7%. This means that, on average, goods that you bought a year ago might cost 6.7% more today. We see signs of higher inflation nearly everywhere, at the supermarket, when we eat out, at the petrol kiosk, and even in our electricity bills. But a stronger currency means that Singaporeans have been protected from the worst of the global price increases.
Suppose we want to buy an apple. The apple probably is imported from, say, New Zealand. So that means that it has to be paid in New Zealand dollar. If Singapore dollar gets stronger against the New Zealand dollar, then the apple actually is going to cost us less. If MAS tightens the monetary policy, the exchange rate can be made steeper. That means that apple that we talked about is going to be less expensive. It cannot solve the problem completely, but it actually helps somewhat.
Over the past year, global food prices have risen by about 23%. But in Singapore, they have risen by 5.4%. But there are also costs involved with having a stronger currency. At some point, MAS can't keep pushing the Singapore dollar higher without growth slowing.
The better it performs, it's kind of worse for our business here, right? Suppose we are producing something like a silicon wafer for computer chips. Now that for the other currency is now more expensive. The second thing, that Singapore wants to become a hub for financial technology as well. All these services that are generated will have to be paid in Singapore dollars. So the service sector cost will also go up. I mean, last but not the least, tourism. So any tourist coming to Singapore will have to pay in Singapore dollar. If Singapore dollar appreciates, it is going to be a much more expensive vacation. So they might think twice before coming in and spending that amount of money. So all three things actually helps in generating income in Singapore. There is kind of a fine balancing act.
Even though the stronger Singapore dollar has cushioned some of the impact of higher global prices, 7 out of 10 Singaporeans are worried about the high cost of living in the future. However, there are government support schemes available to help you. To help cushion the impact for regular Singaporean households, there are short-term subsidies such as $100 CDC vouchers, reduced S&CC rates, and USAVE rebates. There is also the $100 household utilities credit, and up to $700 will also be given to eligible GSTV cash recipients in August 2022. But in the long term, the most important thing is that our wages rise more than prices. This will only be achieved if businesses increase salaries and workers become more productive. These will ultimately make our economy, and in turn our currency, stronger over time.
The biggest resource of Singapore is her human capital. Having a political stability is absolutely important. Having stability of prices so that people don't have to move out because of economic reason. And finally, the ease of doing business. So those are the essential parts of how Singapore can grow and develop into the future, even with a stronger currency, which might actually be an asset more than a liability. So I don't think we are there yet that we will foresee double-digit inflation. If you look at the average across the board, things seems to be slightly stabilizing across the world, including in Singapore. But we are living in uncertain times. It's a global problem, not just Singapore problem. Singapore is facing the problem in the real sense because we are a small open economy, and everything that is going around the world will actually affect us directly or indirectly.